Now it's time for us to introduce our fabulous author, Judith Viorst, and her featured book right here, Making the Most of What's Left When You Are Too Old. I love the title, When You're Too Old to Get the Chairs Reupholstered. It made me laugh out loud and tear up at many places. Judith is a best-selling author of dozens of children's and adult books over her 50-plus years of career as a published author and a journalist. I didn't have the privilege of growing up as an American, so I'm sure I missed out a lot of the fun of reading her book. But I know my grown son, when he was a kid, loved her books, and I'm sure many of you probably read her books as you grew up or read to your children, including the blockbuster children's book like Alexander the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day, which sold over 2 million copies and counting. Now, at 94 years young, she is a shining example of how to enjoy the final fifth or the fifth of your life. In this book, she speaks eloquently and freely about being old and tell the story after story of good and bad examples of dealing with a life with the shrinking mental and physical capacities and the circles of connections. I loved every page of the book, with wisdom and humor pouring out of each page. It's both a delightful and a fun read, but also a deep and a brave look at the many dimensions of aging that we all struggle after reaching a certain point in life, but are too afraid to talk about it. There are so many pages and the lines in the book where I highlighted and made me pause, such as when she pleads her deceased husband, Milton, to stop being dead. And I love the combination of essays and the poems, which gives it a special rhythm. Earlier this year, I lost my 91-year-old father. That got me think seriously about how I am going to live out the rest of my life. And of course, even though I barely started my fifth of the journey. So this is a great timely guidebook for making the most of what's left of our time and the relationships, because as Judith said in the book, I don't want to flunk old age. Now I'm going to turn to the moderator and the interviewer, Nora Krug, the Washington Post staff editor for Book World, with a focus on children's books, memoirs, fiction, parenting, health, and fitness. Before joining the Post, Nora was an editor at the New York Times and Architectural Digest. It's an honor to have both of you here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. So, Judith, we were giggling a little bit about the intro because she's not declined at all. She wasn't wearing a seatbelt in the golf cart, and we've been chatting for the last half an hour, and I'm excited to have you all listen to what I got to hear earlier and more. This is not the first time that I've spoken to Judith. No. She was kind enough to give me some quotes for an article that I wrote about this book when it became a movie, and I interviewed her son, Alex, who is the star of this book that I continue to read. It still resonates with me. I actually reread it this morning. I'm not having that kind of a day, but if I were, I'd know that sometimes days are like that. So thank you for that message.
Thank you.
So I guess we can just, if you don't mind, start with that book for a minute. It's been 50 years, roughly, since it came out, and it continues to be, I know a lot of new mothers who read it to their children. It actually, a brand new copy ended up in my little free library the other day, so clearly it's circulating a lot. What do you think it is about this book that makes it such a classic?
Well, I think everybody has rotten days, and I think there's also this feeling that some malevolent force up there is singling out you. You are personally going to have a rotten day, courtesy of me. And then it's very consoling to get the idea that it happens to everybody. no matter how crafty you are. I get letters from kids all the time basically saying, you think he had a bad day? So it's very universal.
So you've written a lot of books since then. We were on our ride over here, we were trying to figure out the number, and I think, Judith, we landed on 46, some for adults, some for children. And I guess that's a lot of books, no matter how old you are, and just wondering what's the secret to your productiveness?
Well, I always wanted to be a writer, and I started sending out stuff to my mother's women's magazines when I was 7, with a very nice sharp pencil and my best printing. And I never got a word published, though I steadfastly sent out, until I got married and had children. And I was not going to miss the opportunity, even though the first book I wrote was a book on the NASA space program. And believe me, few people in the world know less about space than me. But my husband, who was a Washington Post reporter at the time, said, "Say yes, we'll figure out where space is." And in order to get the opportunity to be a writer, I had to have a very strict schedule, and it kind of went with my personality, so I can write anywhere.
And so I think this is correct. Since you turned 30, you've written a book about each decade of your life.
Right.
That's correct. Nearing 90 was the most recent, and then we have this one. Do you have a favorite decade of your life, and if so, why?
Well, no, I actually do have a favorite decade of my life, and it's the 50s.
Thank you, because I'm in that.
Okay, this wasn't a secret plot in advance. I used to give talks to people when I was in my 40s, bitching and moaning about the fact that how hard the 40s were, and how your kneecaps started sagging, and you knew you were going to die no matter how crafty you were, and Paul Newman was not leaving Joanne for you. And all opportunities had closed. And every time I gave this harangue, somebody, every single time, would get up in the audience and say, "Honey, wait till your 50s. It gets so much better." And it did, because you start looking at what you've got instead of what you don't got. And you start realizing what you're good at, what you love. You're not as self-centered as you used to be, or self-pitying as you used to be, and God knows as self-righteous as you used to be. And it gets to be a very, very nice decade. So lots of luck, Nora.
Thank you. And here I was thinking of the Paul Simon, why am I soft in the middle when the rest of my life is so hard? Moving on to your new book, which I actually took off some of the sticky notes. I had so many pages that I liked. So you talk about the final fifth. So
yes.
Tell me, what is the definition of the?
Well,
I can guess.
Yeah, I sort of divided up the world from 0 to 100. Figure, I know a lot of people live past 100, but not that many. So I figured 20, 40, 60, 80, and 80 to 100 was the fifth of life, the final fifth. And I was well installed in it, and in fact I am 6 years from being 100. So I was very interested in this period of life and how you lived it, and what were the hardships and what were the pleasures, if any, of that time of life. Interviewed a lot of people, and that's how I got to the final fifth.
I'm going to just take you from there and say, in a few words, what are some of the hardships and what are some of the benefits of the final fifth?
Well, certainly the hardships are a lot of people you love die. And there's just no way around that. And you really can't talk about benefits and the wonderful parts of it until you acknowledge the sorrows. Your body is also betraying you, and after all you've done for your body is now screwing you over. And you spend a vast amount of times getting tests and injections in your eye and things in your chest, God knows what else. So there's between death and doctors, you've got a lot of things to complain about. What you have to love is that I think we've gotten pretty good at loving what we've got, paying attention to the world around us in a way that maybe we thought we had an infinite amount of time, we didn't. And having, the great, great blessings of long-term friendships, of family, and just the luck of being here. The epigraph of my book, which I love, comes from a poet, and it's, in the meantime, enjoy not being dead. I'm trying to enjoy not being dead.
That's a perfect segue to say I've described your book to my friends as sort of Nora Ephron-esque, and yet it's so much more optimistic to me than, the famous "I feel bad about my neck." I mean, you don't seem to feel bad about your neck or even about the chairs that are not going to get upholstered. Am I right about that? And where does your optimism spring from?
I don't think, Nora, that anybody has actually ever accused me of being optimistic before.
Well, I'm honored.
I get to positive by a very long, circuitous route, which involves a lot of crying and blaming and hollering. I don't think I've written about anything funny in any of my books that I haven't cried over first. And eventually I get to see the humor of what once seemed to be the end of the world, but it takes a little time.
Which is another good segue. I was going to say that I'm sorry about the loss of your husband, which is kind of a centerpiece of the book. You were married for 63 years.
Yeah,
and
almost.
Almost. And your descriptions of it are, so loving and beautiful and sad. And what made your marriage so special? Just in addition to its length.
We were a scrappy couple with a lot of opinions on a lot of things. We were both of us, into the idea of the marriage as a third thing. There was him with his interests and ambitions, me with mine, and this thing we were creating together. We both wanted a family in a very big way. I think on our first date, before we had even said hello, we said, "Do you want children? Do you want children?" Because we weren't going to waste time on somebody who didn't want to have children. So we were very into a creation of a family, and in between there was a lot of hollering and drama. And I would say that the marital love song was not "I love you truly," but "You may have been a headache, but you never were a bore."
I'm not sure how I can follow that one. One of the moving parts of your book is you talk about this nighttime routine you have of not counting sheep, but remembering people you have lost and thinking of them before you go to bed at night. And I was just wondering if you could tell us about this ritual and how it came to be and how it functions for you.
I started thinking about this one or that one sometimes when I went to bed and couldn't fall asleep. And then I sort of developed it into a habit of counting the dead, remembering people, remembering who they were, what they gave me, what I was like then. My members of my family, boyfriends who taught me everything from how to enjoy movies with subtitles, to how to eat an artichoke. And some of the regrets that I had, which were sometimes difficult to think about in the middle of the night. And I guess among them was this great big regret that I have, which was that I didn't ask enough questions. While my mother was alive, my father was alive, my grandparents were alive, I was so damn dumb. I did not realize that they had stories to tell, that they had things in their lives that I didn't know about. And I only figured that out afterwards. So everybody here, ask questions. Ask questions.
Something that we talked about on the way over was your transitioning from, your family home in the book you describe very beautifully, and it sounded like a lot I wish I was one of your kids so I could hang out there. It sounded like a lot of fun, and now you've moved to a retirement community.
Right.
And I know this is my own parents have done so as well. And how was that transition, and what might you advise people who are facing it? Or
Well, I was deeply, deeply in love with my house, and I was often known to be putting my arms around one of the many columns on the front porch saying, "I will die from this house." It didn't work out that way. It was a house with a lot of stairs, and my husband had AFib. And so we moved for health reasons, and then wound up, to our absolute astonishment, liking it and adjusting far, far more quickly than we ever expected to. A lot of it had to do with the place. It was a very beautiful place, and it's in town, and we had a lot of friends there, and it has enough activities to keep you busy from now until 20 years after you're dead. So it was a good move, and we were grown up enough to say we had what we had then. Now we're having something else now.
For this book, you conducted a lot of interviews with some of the other people who live
Right.
in your community, and it's sort of interesting to get all the variety of perspectives. So I'm wondering, what was the experience of reporting this book, and what were some of the things you learned from others?
Oh, I was outrageous. I mean, here I had this whole community at my fingertips. So, for instance, I'd be in line for a COVID shot, and it was a long line. So I tapped the shoulder of the lady in front of me. I say, "Hi, I'm Judith Viorst. I'm writing a book. I'm on a chapter on the afterlife right now. So, do you believe in the afterlife? And if so, can we discuss it?" I have to tell you that I tapped a lot of people on the shoulder. One person the whole time, and for interesting reasons, one person did not want to be interviewed for the book. Everybody else talked their little hearts out.
Can you offer one of the highlights of one of those conversations besides the COVID shot?
Well, there was a woman there who was 100 years old. This is a magnificent woman, still brilliant, very creative, still playing bridge and chess, and which is pretty impressive. She was just reminiscing, and she talked about one of her points of pride. She had been a widow, and she belonged to the Cosmos Club, and she said there was a very attractive man there, and all the women were after him, and I got him. I love that.
Yeah. Are they still together?
Well, I think he died a while ago, but she got him. She married him.
So you write about some of the particular challenges of being older in society, of being invisible and losing some of your independence, and not wanting to take risks. That a lot of people, I can only say my own parents deal with this. Yet here you are. You've written a book. You're sitting here talking to me. Like, how did you push past this inertia and fear and take these risks?
Well, I didn't. In some cases, I certainly don't do the kind of traveling I used to do anymore. I'm like a lot of people, even if you go on a cruise ship, and you skip the expeditions and everything, you're sitting in a chair, you get a pain in your chest, and you're thinking, indigestion or a coronary? And then the next thing you're thinking is, can a person be airlifted from a cruise ship? And often the decision is to stay home. So I think I will continue writing because I don't have any cardiac issues with that.
So I'm 54 and my parents are in their 80s. So much of what you wrote about being older and dealing with adult children was very familiar to me. And so I'm wondering if you have any advice for me about how can I be better to my aging parents?
Bear with them. Bear with them, and maybe they will bear with you. And
I will be sure to tell my mother that.
yeah, I mean, I still have my children coming to visit. The first thing they do is open the refrigerator, start sniffing, yank something out triumphantly, well past its expiration date, and decide that I need adult supervision.
My mother will tell you that I do that same thing. Yeah, the expiration date clean out is one of my specialties. But anyway, so you're a poet. You love poetry. There's a lot of fun poetry in this book. So tell me about some of your favorite poetry and what you like about it in particular.
Poetry in general.
A poem that you like and why.
Well, in this book, I think I think my favorite poem is the last poem in the book.
I was going to ask you to read it, so.
Okay, I can do that. Do you have a copy?
I have it.
Okay.
There are
I'll
a couple
read
of
it.
poems I wanted you to read, but here. You want to find it, or I'll hold this.
Okay.
Oh, I'm supposed to talk to the audience while she's looking for the pages. See, I liked it too.
So this is actually a poetic version of something that actually happened with me and my doctor, who I love. And in fact, it's the only poem. I've dedicated it to him. The poem is called Prescription. Reupholster or not reupholster, that is the question. It is hard for us in our 90s to plan ahead. 2 of my living room chairs have gotten quite threadbare. But wait, will the new fabric get here before I am dead? At our age, or so that old joke goes, don't buy green bananas. A 2-year subscription? Read a short story instead. My chairs, if reupholstered, would look so much better. But I might not know how they're looking because I'll be dead. So I talked with my doctor after my annual checkup. All the tests had been given, the lab reports read. Planning is hard, I complain, for us in our 90s. You just never know where, when, why, how, or if you'll be dead. He wrote a prescription for me. Reupholster, it said.
I did mention the book is very funny. So. Well, I'm running out of questions, but I understand that that you memorize poems as well. Is that? I do. And this is. I mean, I haven't done that since I was in about 6th grade, and I'm very impressed. And I'm wondering why you do that, and if you might conjure one from memory for us. Not to put you on the spot or anything.
No, I've been memorizing poetry for several years. A lot of my, we all worry about our memory. So on one level, everybody's doing something to sharpen their memory. I think, why do a crossword puzzle or a Wordle or whatever? I don't do any of that. Doesn't seem to do that much for me. Memorizing poetry feels like little treasures that I've got inside of myself. And I've reassured all my friends I will not insist on making them listen to me while I recite. I did try to encourage my children and then my grandchildren to memorize poetry, but at the end of every session, I would have memorized another poem, and I was zero for. I offered them money. They said that's contemptible to pay. I don't know where they got so sanctimonious all of a sudden, but there they were. So I'll recite one of the first poems I learned. It's by Louis MacNeice. It's called "The Sunlight on the Garden," and there's a reference to Egypt in the poem. Egypt is what Anthony called Cleopatra, and this is his farewell. The sunlight on the garden hardens and grows cold. We cannot cage the minute within its nets of gold. When all is told, we cannot beg for pardon. Our freedom as freelances advances towards its end. The earth compels upon it sonnets and birds descend. And soon, my friend, we will have no time for dances. The sky was good for flying, defying the church bells at every evil iron siren and what it tells. The earth compels. We are dying, Egypt, dying. But not expecting pardon, hardened in heart anew, and glad to have sat under thunder and rain with you, and grateful, too, for sunlight on the garden.
Amazing. Thank you. I think that's a lovely note to end on, but if you have anything you'd like to add before we open up the questions,
I don't think so, except I'm thrilled at all these people here, and I would like to hear what they have to ask me.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. That was fantastic. I would just like to say, expiration dates are only a suggestion. And I'll be happy to open it up for questions.
You said you're still writing. Can we anticipate and look forward to another book?
I hope so. I have a book idea that I've had in my head for 10 years, and I have 2 pages on. It's for children, and it means a lot to me, but it's a hard book to write, and I don't know if I'm going to write it, but I'm going to try.
You mentioned you tapped on one shoulder and the person declined to speak to you. Who was that person? Who was the person who said no?
Say that again?
You'd mentioned that you interviewed all sorts of people and you would tap on their shoulder and say, I'm thinking about the afterlife. What do you think? And that one person declined to speak to you.
Okay, and that's a very interesting question, because what I wanted her to talk to me about was I was writing a chapter on loneliness, and loneliness is something that causes people, in addition to pain and feeling isolated, feelings of shame. What is the matter with me that I can't be alone? What's the matter with me that I don't have enough people in my life? And I think it was out of her shame, rather than anything else, that made her decline. She did not want to talk about it. And I thought how incredibly sad that was, that in addition to all the other burdens of loneliness is the shame of being lonely.
Thank you so much. My father was an upholsterer.
chairs and sofas back together, and I spent my childhood watching the process. I think you need to write a poem about reupholstering, please.
Well, I'm glad that I'm supporting his business.
I wanted to ask you, from your travels and talking to so many elderly people, what one or two things are the biggest regrets that you see that people tell you about?
I think a lot of people feel sorry that they didn't slow down more, pay attention to what was important, not really understand what was important until they were looking back and said, I missed this whole chunk of my kid's childhood, or I drove through this beautiful part of the country and all I could think about was what was going on with my business. So I think that was one big regret. And I think a lot of people just wish they had been kinder to other people. I certainly am sorry that sometimes my to-do list seems to dominate my universe when it shouldn't have.
Can you tell us a little bit about your writing process?
My writing process. I told you earlier that I longed to be a writer and nobody would publish me. When I started getting published, I also started being a mommy. And I realized that there was no way I could do both of these things unless I was totally flexible about writing. No inspiration, no mood, no right place. I can write under any circumstances, everywhere. I can stop in the middle of writing a poem on a dime to pick up a kid at nursery school. And some of the locations in which I have written I can't even talk about because they're so unseemly. But one of the nicer ones was when I was driving to the supermarket, I stopped for a light and I had, grabbed the back of my checkbook and wrote a couple of lines of something that were really working for me. Got to the supermarket, paid my bill with a check, and as I was walking out, I said, oh my God. I gave him the check with the 2 lines on it, and I had to go back and get them. I can write anywhere, under any circumstances.
I know the feeling.
You can do that.
Thank you. So as a teacher, we always talked about the resilient child, but now that I'm in my late 70s, we're talking about the resilient older person. And I just wanted to tell you about a friend of ours who has cancer. It's her second bout with it. She said, I don't want chemo this time. They gave her 3 months to live. I think she's going on 8 or 9 at this point. She is so happy. She goes everywhere. She's got a smile on her face, and she is a joy to be with. So I think that's a wonderful quality as you get older.
Absolutely, and that's a great, great story. I love it. Thank you for telling it.
Oh, hold on. On this side of the room.
We have plenty of time.
Yeah, we have lots of time.
You have Judith Viorst. Someone must have. Sorry.
You had mentioned missing being able to ask your parents and grandparents questions. What would you ask of them today? And likewise, what questions from your children or grandchildren would inspire you to be asked yourself?
Well, my grandmother, Clara, who I write about, who I wasn't all that crazy about, and who lived with us for a while, had an amazing history, which I was too stupid to ask about. My grandmother was widowed when when her husband was in his 30s. He left her with 4 kids. Everybody said, put them in a foster care or in a orphan asylum. You can't do this. And Clara did do it. She raised the kids. I think she had a little grocery store. She had 4 kids who she raised to productive adulthood. I don't know anything about how that happened, and shame on me. I am sorry. I don't know about what I would want my kids to ask about me. I think I've put all of the printable parts in print, so I think I'll leave it right there.
I just wanted to tell you that you're talking about your, regret not asking enough questions. And last year, my daughter gave me as a gift a thing called Story Worth. And every week, in the beginning of the week, you get emailed a question, and it's about your life. It can be, what vacations did you take, or how did you meet your partner, or, there's 52 questions, and you answer it, and at the end, she puts it into a book. And I just think it's a fabulous tool to gather that information.
Oh, that's wonderful. And it's great that she's got the questions lined up like that. Very good idea.
I just have one comment. I read your book. I loved it, as all your books I've loved. And I wanted to thank you for your efforts in sending out postcards to get out the vote, and how you wrote the poem to get out the vote. That was one of my favorites in the book. So thank you very much.
You're very welcome. This was in reference to. I have a chapter on happiness, and various things you can do to make yourself happier in old age. Like. Don't be so quick to get your feelings hurt, shrug it off, be a mentor, develop more gratitude. But the last on my list of things to make yourself happier was help save the world. I mean, I realize that we all have the tendency to say, well, we've had a nice run, it was a good life, but we're leaving a mess for the younger generation, and it's their turns. And as we leave the stage, we might want to say we're sorry, but too late. And then as I was thinking about this, I realized we haven't left yet. We're still here. We're not gone. We're not dead. And why not find some small something to do that could make things better? Maybe it won't make things better, but it'll certainly make you happier. So I had a friend delivered to my apartment 1,000 postcards, get out the vote postcards during the last election. And they said, write a little message on each postcard, and, you get people to, and everybody said, they're going to throw them right in the trash, but I figured I wanted to do this. And every morning for a long period of time, I'd put some music on, and I'd write a little really dopey poem about.
I got one.
Nora, read it. I'm not going to read it.
All right, it's called Getting Out the Vote. It's voting time. I'm back in touch to say your vote counts very much. Here is a message I'm proud to promote. Democracy needs you. Be sure to vote. And then I'm writing upside down to get your attention, but getting you to vote is my only intention.
Beautifully rendered, Nora.
I know that humor's played a big part in getting you through life, as you have us all laughing here. But how does faith and spirituality, are there times where you just said, I don't know, and just wondered if that has played an important part in your life?
Well, I'm not a religious person. I don't believe in an afterlife. I am trying my best to live the life I've got right here and now, and do some things that I might have my kids be proud of. But I I worked as a volunteer in a hospice for 23 years, and I have to say that I very much envy the people who did have faith, because it sure does help.
Oh, hi. I was wondering, when you write about family and friends, how that goes for you, how you finesse it, how they respond.
Well, what I've done is, first of all, everybody I've interviewed, I get their permission to use their first names and the details of their life. If they don't want me to do that, I change their first names, and I fudge enough of the details so that they won't, they won't feel exposed. And since this isn't reporting, I don't think Nora would do this with a story. But in this book, I read my stories about them back to them. I wasn't looking to hurt anybody's feelings, and I even changed a couple of names to fake names, because I didn't think the people who were telling me the stories had protected themselves as much as I wanted them protected, so I changed it. And writing about my family, that's a whole other story. It was much easier when the kids could not read.
So I think, well, this is, her real son, and didn't you write a book for each one of your children?
Yes, the kid is mentioned in each one, but my great tragic exchange in this area was, I wrote a column for Red Book magazine for many years, and one summer, this is a poignant story, one summer all my kids came back from camp with head lice. Well, to say I was rendered suicidal would be to understate the case. I was doing a lot of sobbing and screaming, and my husband kept on saying, "For God's sakes, this isn't syphilis, it's head lice." But I was not pulling myself together. Red Book said, "Well, why don't you write about it?" So I said, "Okay, that's how I'll get it out of my system." So I wrote it. When it appeared, on the front of the magazine was "My Lousy Kids" by Judith Viorst. My kids came home from school in something of a fit, and in the greatest mommy magic act of my life, I said, "Boys, you have made such a contribution to mankind. People all over the world are hiding, ashamed and humiliated that their kids have head lice, and you just came out and said it isn't really a shameful thing, and good for you." After that, since then, I have been very careful.
Make time for at least one more. Any other questions?
Oh,
Go ahead.
yeah. Okay, hi. What do you think of the idea of writing your own obituary?
Oh, good. Oh, I writing your own obituary. Milton and I had actually talked about doing it, but we were too busy.
Okay.
So I think it's a good idea, but we did not do it.
One last question.
I want to say thank you for everybody who's here, who for the last years and decades, we've been buying your book every 10 years. It started with "It's Hard to Be Hip Over 30," and I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all very much.